Good evening and welcome to Gravitas and Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. Poor leadership can spell doom. History is full of examples. Our world today is full of examples. Poor leadership in Sri Lanka left the country bankrupt. Poor leadership in China gave the world a pandemic. Poor leadership in North Korea is making its people starve. And this crisis gets amplified when you have poor leadership during wartime. Case in point, Ukraine. When Ukraine first came under attack, many said it won't survive because it has a comedian president, a man who lacks the experience to lead in such situations. 5 months and more than 14,000 Ukrainian deaths later, those critics make sense. As the country suffers Russian strikes, its president is busy with photo shoots. As Russia keeps taking more territory, he's busy releasing videos, and now he's on the cover of a fashion magazine. At best, it's poor judgment. At worst, it's a crass stunt. Zelensky is being slammed left, right and centre for it. On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss why he's lost the plot. Do you recognize the man in these photos? Of course you do. That's Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. He's supposed to be fighting a war with Russia. Except he is posing for a fashion magazine. Zelensky is in front of the cameras. That's where he has been since the war began. One day he's posing with troops. The next day with people on the streets. And now he's posing for a fashion magazine. The president is the cover story of the Vogue. What's so fashionable about war? Where is the need to pose in front of sandbags and devastation? If this is an attempt to draw attention to the war, it's pointless because the world already knows about the war. The whole world today is facing the brunt of this war. May not be in the form of raining missiles, but definitely in the form of rising meal prices. Also, if the idea is to spread awareness, why not capture the faces that really depict this war? Like this baby who was born on a subway, or this boy who was left motherless. And I'm not pitting someone's grief against another. I'm not weighing grief. I'm only saying that these photos tell the real story of Ukraine. Not the first lady in designer clothes. So what explains her Vogue feature? We have a portion of the cover story for you. This is what it says. In our 2 conversations in Kiev, Zelensky was forthright, dignified, elegant, a subtle promoter of Ukrainian designers. One day she wore an ecru silk blouse with a black velvet bow tied around the neck and a black mid-calf skirt. Her ash blonde hair swept up in a loose bun. The next day it was wide-leg jeans, chunky white sneakers and yellow and blue detailing, a nod to the Ukrainian flag and a fundraising project by the brand. I couldn't help but think the shirt had the same rusty hue as the burned-out Russian tanks that I saw lining roads in Irpin and Bucha, suburbs of Kiev, where Ukraine pushed back the Russians. Do you find it absurd? You should, because it is. It is absurd that the First Lady of Ukraine is posing against staged war scenes with perfect hair and makeup. It's absurd that the president, who's supposed to be leading the country out of war, is busy posing too. There's also a BTS, by the way, behind the scenes. Take a look at all the preparations that went into this photo shoot. remember, all of this is happening in a country that has been at war for the past 5 months. The cover story is called Portrait of Bravery. It's neither satire nor surprising. Ask yourself this question. What has Zelensky really done since this war began except being on camera? He's been the face of a global PR campaign backed by the West. He's worn olive green T-shirts every day to depict himself as a war hero. He's appeared on television every day, given interviews to media networks worldwide, to possibly anyone and everyone who's asked for one. He has addressed every possible forum. The US Congress, the EU Parliament, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum. He's not even spared the Cannes opening ceremony. You know, the film festival? He was there too. And at one point it seemed like Zelensky was using his screen presence to make a case for Ukraine. He is a former comedian. You know that. He's also done a bit of acting. He knows his camera, his angles. So it appeared as though Zelensky was using his strength to Ukraine's advantage, helping Ukraine win the PR war against Russia. But to what end? Videos do not win wars. And Ukraine is certainly not winning this one. What does Zelensky have to show for all his TV appearances, for all the interviews that he's done? Forget a NATO membership. Ukraine does not even have an entry pass to the European Union. More than 14,000 Ukrainians have been killed. The war has entered its 155th day. Russia has made huge military gains. Ukraine has lost cities and towns. And the president, in between his multiple photo shoots, is blaming his top officials for the setbacks. He's sacking them. He's accusing them of treason, of not doing enough. But what is he, as the president of Ukraine, doing? Zelensky and Zelenska are posing for Vogue, sharing their love story, building their personal brand. This is not the face of bravery or a service to Ukraine. This is an insult to those who are on the front line, those who are fighting the war, braving Russian bullets. This is a deplorable attempt to romanticize war. You all heard of Nero fiddling while Rome burned. The Ukrainian president is becoming the modern-day Nero, posing for cameras as his country suffers. The war in Ukraine is a frozen conflict. It's not ending anytime soon, and it may not have any real winners. That's what happens with long-drawn conflicts. No winners, but clear losers. The losers are the people of those countries. Just look at Iraq. In 2003, the US launched a war on Iraq. 19 years have passed. The US found no weapons of mass destruction. They made a mess of the country and left. And now Iraqis are paying the price for America's actions. In the last 19 years, the country has hurtled from one crisis to another. Let me show you the latest images. Angry citizens storming the Iraqi parliament. These pictures may remind you of what happened in Colombo, but the situation in Iraq is very different. You could say much worse than Sri Lanka. These protesters breached a high-security zone. They pulled down a wall and broke into the Iraqi parliament. Riot police was deployed there. They tried to stop the protesters. They even fired water cannons, but the protesters overpowered them. Once they were inside, the protesters chanted slogans. They gathered on the floor of the parliament. They sat on the chairs of lawmakers. They looked through files and folders. It was complete chaos. And it's been brewing for a while. Iraq has been caught in political turmoil for months. 9 months ago, elections were held in this country. No candidate was able to win majority. And since then, lawmakers have struggled to reach a deal. When they finally did, it sparked a public uprising. Recently, Mohammed al-Sudani was picked to become the Prime Minister of Iraq. He's seen as a pro-Iranian candidate. Al-Sudani is being challenged by Muqtada al-Sadr, an influential Shiite cleric. Also, the driving force behind these protests, most of those who stormed the parliament yesterday are supporters of al-Sadr. They say they do not want corrupt leaders in power.
الآن الشعب العراقي يطالب.
The Iraqi people are asking every honourable man and every honourable politician to hold all thieves of public money accountable. As politicians say, from under the dome of parliament, we demand to hold all corrupt people accountable. And on top of this list is former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki.
من قبة البرلمان احنا شعب.
From the dome of the parliament, we are the Iraqi people, and we do not want you, Maliki. We do not want you, al-Sudani. We do not want any of those people. Maliki, why are you sticking to the government? Why is it still here? You should collect your stuff and leave the country. The people are very tired. The people collapsed. They are hungry and doing drugs. The people are fed up.
Iraq is in dire straits. The political impasse is making things worse. The country has not had a president, a prime minister, or a government for 290 days. You heard that right. Iraq has not had a government for 290 days now. This is their longest post-election deadlock. But it's not their first. Not the first time that Iraq has been paralyzed. From 2019 to 2021, Iraq witnessed massive protests. There was a series of marches and demonstrations. The reasons were the same: state corruption, sectarianism, unemployment, low wages, and poor public services. This is also not the first time the Iraqi parliament was stormed. In 2016, al-Sadr supporters overran the parliament in a similar fashion. So why does it keep happening again and again? Because Iraq remains an unstable country, that's why. 19 years after America invaded and devastated it, Iraq has not been able to find its feet. Look at their economy. Before the war, Iraq had a prospering economy. It was rich thanks to its oil reserves. Iraq had one of the most advanced economies in West Asia. In the 80s, Iraq had $35 billion in its reserves. It also had one of the best education systems in the world. In the early 1970s, education at all levels was free. Enrollment in primary schools stood at 100%. Healthcare was free too. Before 1990, 97% of the urban population had access to free primary health care. 71% of the rural population had the same level of access. And to be fair, Iraq's economy did start stumbling under Saddam Hussein. It accumulated debt worth around $40 billion. But there's no denying the fact that this complete collapse happened after the American invasion. They dismantled the Saddam regime and robbed his country. There's no other way to put it. It was robbery. Money that was supposed to be used to help Iraqis went to American companies. How did that happen? Let me explain. Iraq's main source of revenue was the export of oil. Once the Saddam regime was toppled, a consolidated fund was created. It was under the control of the Coalition Provisional Authority, the CPA, a sort of a transition government. And this government was established by the US and its allies. These funds financed Iraq's reconstruction. America also sponsored some of these reconstruction efforts. It was supposed to rehabilitate Iraqis. But it ended up benefiting American companies. Consider this. More than 70 American companies and individuals won reconstruction contracts in Iraq. They were paid from Iraq's revenues. This was during the first year of the occupation alone. How many contracts did Iraqi firms get? Next to none. Only 2% of the money spent on reconstruction went into Iraqi hands. How much did American firms profit from the conflict? America's top 10 contractors got a whopping $72 billion. When the Americans finally left, Iraq was bankrupt. And since then, millions of people have sunk into poverty. In 2018, Iraq's poverty rate stood at 20%. Last year, it shot up to 30%. At least 12 billion Iraqis are considered poor today. Their country was plundered in more ways than one. It lost many of its cultural and historic treasures too. The US invasion led to mass looting. Tens of thousands of antiques were looted. Curators at the Iraqi museum made desperate pleas to Washington. They wanted the museum and its artifacts to be secured, but the US government paid them no heed. The museum was looted. The then US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was asked about this. Do you know what he said? Stuff happens. Those were his words. Stuff happens. To Iraq, that stuff is still happening, unfortunately. Iraq still hasn't been able to recover its lost treasures. At least 15,000 items were taken from Iraqi museums. 8,000 of them are still missing. With the invasion, Iraq has lost its identity. It remains stuck in a seemingly endless spiral of violence. It has witnessed an insurgency in Fallujah. It has seen attacks by criminal gangs, Sunni militias, terrorist groups like the Al-Qaeda. In 2014, it witnessed the uprising of a deadly terrorist group, the Islamic State. And all of this happened due to a leadership vacuum. The US came to install democracy in Iraq. It has left behind a legacy of economic crisis, sectarianism, and violence. And now the US has turned to another theatre of conflict, the South China Sea. America has sent an aircraft carrier to the region. China responded with a military exercise. At the center of the saber rattling is Taiwan. What makes it worse is a proposed visit. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wants to go to Taiwan. China is mighty upset. It is threatening military retaliation. And amid this confrontation, Joe Biden, the US president, dialed Xi Jinping, the Chinese president. That conversation happened today. How long was the conversation? What did they discuss? And have they been able to dial down the tensions? Here's the report.
The 15th of November 2021, Joe Biden and Xi Jinping held their first meeting. A face-to-face virtual summit which lasted 3 hours. The aim was to engage better, also to stop their rivalry from turning into conflict.
As I've said before, it seems to me our responsibility as leaders of China and the United States is to ensure that the competition between our countries does not veer into conflict.
7 months later, the exact opposite has happened. Bilateral ties have worsened, tensions are at an all-time high, and there's a looming risk of conflict. A potential visit by US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan has further amplified the animosity. Beijing is threatening a strong retaliation if the visit goes ahead. They say they won't shy away from a military response. The threat is clear. Amid this face-off, Joe Biden dialed Xi Jinping on Thursday. It's their 5th conversation in 2 years. What did the two leaders talk about? The White House is yet to say, but a range of topics are likely to have been discussed. Starting with the looming threat of conflict, Beijing has become more aggressive in the South China Sea. It has expanded its maritime claims and reportedly even driven away US warships. Washington fears that without open lines of communication with Beijing, there could be more such encounters, which may eventually spiral into an unintended conflict.
Maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait isn't just a U.S. interest, it's a matter of international concern. So let me be clear. We do not seek confrontation or conflict. And we do not seek a new Cold War, an Asian NATO, or a region split into hostile blocs. We will defend our interests without flinching.
Nancy Pelosi's proposed visit to Taiwan is adding to the worries. Pelosi is the second in line to the U.S. presidency. She would be the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Taiwan since 1997. Naturally, China is not too excited about the visit. It has threatened a resolute and strong response, even military action.
The Ministry of National Defense of China has said that if America remains on this course, the Chinese military will not sit idly. It will take strong measures to stop any attempts to interfere or split Taiwan from China. We Chinese do what we say.
What are the chances of China executing this threat? It helps to look at history. In 1995, when Taiwan's President Lee Teng-hui visited Washington, China launched military exercises and fired missiles into waters near Taiwan. Since then, Beijing's military capabilities have advanced significantly, and so have its stakes and the ambitions of its leadership. Just 24 hours back, an American aircraft carrier entered the South China Sea, the USS Ronald Reagan, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered vessel. In response, the PLA accelerated its military exercises, signaling how America is crossing the red line. These developments have spooked markets. Investors are already assessing the risks of conflict. Will China and the US go to war? Will Nancy Pelosi go ahead with her visit? Will the US back down and lose face? Or risk another war? A lot depends on how Biden's phone call with Xi Jinping went, and his record of resolving tension by conversation is not inspiring. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Real estate is the best investment. Have you ever got this advice? If you're watching us from India, I'm sure you can relate to this. There are many who still consider buying property as the best form of investment. Some even feel it is safer than parking cash in a bank, that the property sector will never collapse. The richest woman in Asia thought so too. She has now lost half of her fortune. This is the story of Yang Huiyan. Like I said, she's the richest woman in Asia, but today she can barely hold on to that tag. Yang has suffered a loss of almost $12 billion. How did that happen? All thanks to the collapse of the Chinese property sector. Yang had inherited her wealth from her father, Yang Guoqiang. He is the founder of a company called Country Garden. It's China's biggest property developer. In 2005, Yang Sr. transferred his shares to his daughter. She's now a majority shareholder in Country Garden. Last year, her net worth stood at around $24 billion. Today, it has dropped to $11.3 billion. It's a fall of 52%. What explains this collapse? The turmoil in China's property sector. Country Garden has managed to avoid the storm so far, but the company is struggling. They made an announcement recently. They will sell their shares to the public. Why? Because they want $343 million. The company seems to have run out of cash. It needs money to pay its debts. Country Garden is the second most indebted developer in China. How much does it owe? At least $220 billion until last year. That was the debt. The company has not defaulted, but it needs money to service future loans. It also wants funding for future projects. And no one is willing to lend to Chinese developers these days, not even Asia's richest woman. So the only way for Country Garden to raise money is perhaps by selling shares. Yang Huiyan has become the face of China's real estate crisis. Her swift decline is a major red flag for many. It underlines how the crisis in China's property market could damage its financial system. If China's largest property developer cannot raise cash today despite zero defaults, it means that Chinese banks are reeling too. Which is why Beijing has now been forced to come up with a bailout. It's official. China's central bank has been asked to step in. It will mobilize $148 billion. Where will this money go? It will be used to revive stalled projects in the property sector. How will developers get this money? This is not going to be a free ride. They will have to take it as a loan. State-owned banks in China will give these loans. Beijing says these will be low-interest loans. We're talking about an interest rate of about 1.75% a year. And it may sound like an attractive proposition, but can it solve the problem? The Chinese property sector has a huge burden of debt. Developers are defaulting. 24 Chinese developers today are under the lens. Some of them have already defaulted. The rest are close to a default. And China's solution is to give them more loans to deal with existing loans. How does that even help? Chinese banks are already struggling. The list of bad loans is growing longer. I have an estimate with me. Debts worth $436 billion have been classified as non-performing loans in China. Chinese commercial banks gave out these loans, but the borrowers have stopped paying back their debts. Several bad loans have been written off. China's banking regulator recently issued orders. It asked small and medium-sized banks to dispose of some loans. What was the value of those loans? Close to $88 billion, according to one report. So Chinese banks are clearly on shaky ground, and Beijing is piling more debt on them. The property sector has collapsed under the burden of this debt. Will Chinese banks collapse next? We'll be keeping a close eye on how things develop. But talking about bailouts, it seems like another South Asian country needs money. It started with Sri Lanka, then Pakistan, and now Bangladesh has reached out to the International Monetary Fund. Dhaka too wants a loan. And not too long ago, Bangladesh was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. At one point, it was doing better than India. What happened then? Why does Bangladesh need an IMF loan now? The global economic crisis is hurting it. Bangladesh is running low on foreign exchange. It wants more dollars. 8 days ago, Dhaka had almost $40 billion in its reserves. That's only good enough to cover imports for about 5 months. The reserves are depleting fast. There are two reasons for that. Number one, rising inflation, especially the cost of fuel. Dhaka is spending more on its imports, so the reserves are being used up quickly. Problem number two, falling remittances. Less money is flowing into Bangladesh from overseas. Remittances fell by 5% in the month of June. So Dhaka basically now has less dollars in its reserves. And this has led to shortages. In recent weeks, there have been long blackouts across the country, sometimes for up to 13 hours in a day. There are reports of rationing too. Tens of thousands of mosques have received instructions. They have been asked to cut down on the use of air conditioners. Officials want to put less pressure on the power grid. That's because electricity production cannot keep up with the demand. Diesel power plants have been taken off the grid. Some gas-fired plants are also not operating. Why? Reports say there's a shortage of diesel and gas supplies, so the plants are unable to operate. And all of this is happening due to the shortage of dollars. Finance Minister A.H.M. Mustafa Kamal spoke out yesterday, and I have that statement with me. This is what he said. We can't print dollars. We have to earn them. We earn dollars by the hard work of our people who work or do business abroad. They are the driving force of our economy. So Bangladesh has now reached out to the IMF for a loan. How much money does it need? At least $4.5 billion, according to reports. There's no official confirmation. Reports say Dhaka wants this money to deal with a balance of payments crisis. Some funds will also go towards dealing with climate change. The loan now seems like a necessity for Bangladesh. Other economic indicators for the country are not looking good. And to understand why, you must understand what led to their economic rise in the first place. Bangladesh grew on the back of an export boom. The country is known for its garment exports. But in recent months, Bangladesh has been importing more. Imports have jumped by 39%. Exports, on the other hand, grew by just 34%. So there's a gap. Their currency has also depreciated in the last 3 months. The Bangladesh taka has lost 20% of its value against the dollar. Will the situation get worse from here? Dhaka says there's no reason to be alarmed. The finance minister issued another statement today, and this is what he said this time. We're waiting to see their conditions. If the IMF conditions are in favor of the country and compatible with our development policy, we'll go for it, otherwise not. Seeking a loan from the IMF does not mean Bangladesh's economy is in bad shape. So what really is happening in Bangladesh? Is it out of cash? Or does it just need a bridge loan to tide over a temporary crisis? Only the IMF can make that assessment. Their team will travel to Dhaka in September for talks. Now, do you remember the G20 summit in 2018? You may not. It's usually a boring affair, but this one was not. This G20 summit was in Argentina in the month of November. It happened days after the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi's killing made the West furious. It could not criticize Saudi Arabia enough. All fingers were pointing at Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the Saudi crown prince. Leaked analysis from the CIA implicated him. The US named MBS as the man who commissioned the hit squad. The West, being the West, and the self-appointed torchbearer of human rights, decided to make MBS a pariah at G20. Let me show you a sample. The Saudi crown prince was left literally cornered during the G20 group photo. Cut to 2022. MBS is now in Europe. It's his first visit there since the killing of Khashoggi. And look at the welcome he's getting. Look at the loud claps, the warm handshake. Look at the contrast since 2018. What has changed in the last 3.5 years? Khashoggi is still dead. There's no justice. So what has changed? Global politics and economics, that's what has changed. Europe is hurting. It is at the receiving end on both counts, politically and economically. There's a war in Ukraine. Europe decided to take on Russia indirectly, and now it is suffering the consequences. Russia is turning off the gas taps. Winter is coming. Europe needs energy, and Saudi Arabia has energy in the form of oil. It is, in fact, the world's biggest crude oil exporter. Now look at this hospitality in this context, and it will all make sense. This is Europe getting off its high horse. It has ended MBS's isolation. Greece just signed a host of agreements with Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Crown Prince visited Greece for 2 days. He met the Prime Minister. He signed agreements on defense technology, maritime transport, food production, and cultural agreements.
It is an opportunity to reaffirm the strength of our strategic relationship.
I promise you that when I come to Greece, I will not come empty-handed. We have a lot of stuff that's going to be game changer for both of countries and also for the whole region.
It's a game changer indeed. It's almost amazing how fast the West's diplomatic game changes. After Greece, France is now hosting MBS. President Emmanuel Macron has invited the Saudi Crown Prince to Elysee Palace. It's a dinner date. Today, the West couldn't care less about Khashoggi. The man who vowed to make Saudi Arabia a pariah traveled all the way to the kingdom earlier this month. I'm talking about US President Joe Biden. He too wanted to woo MBS. Biden did a little fist bump, smiled wide for the cameras. But he could not get the Saudi prince to pump more oil. Biden's oil diplomacy, much like everything else in foreign affairs, failed. All bets are now on Macron. He's become the de facto leader of Europe ever since Germany's Angela Merkel retired. Macron showed that he could step into Merkel's shoes with his pre-war meetings with Putin. We saw that jet-setting diplomacy. While he could not stop Putin from waging war, he did raise expectations. Will Macron be able to do what Biden could not? Will he be able to get MBS to turn on the oil taps? Macron and MBS, in fact, are on more cordial terms compared to Biden and MBS. Let's go back to the same G20 summit in 2018. While some Western leaders ignored the Saudi prince, Macron decided otherwise. They met on the sidelines of G20. They had a candid conversation, not realizing that the cameras were watching and listening.
Because I told you it was more protected.
Theresa May, Primera Ministra del Reino Unido.
Theresa May, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
What do you think they were telling each other? Macron says, I do worry, I'm worried, I told you. Yes, you told me, MBS replies. You never listened to me, says Macron. No, I listen, of course, replied the smiling Saudi prince. At this point, the two become aware of a TV camera and Macron turns away. He says something inaudible and then MBS replies, it's okay, I can deal with it. Sounds like a conversation between two friends, doesn't it? Macron was the first Western leader to travel to Saudi Arabia since the Khashoggi killing. He traveled to the kingdom in 2021. Some of his voters are not happy with his courting of the crown prince, but the French president has dismissed all criticism. He says the kingdom of Saudi Arabia is too important to be ignored. And he's right. Given the current energy crisis, Europe needs to diversify its energy sources. It needs Saudi Arabia. So forget Khashoggi, or the humanitarian crisis in Yemen, or the Saudi-led coalition's contribution to it. The West could not care less about those things at the moment. This war in Ukraine has been a reality check of sorts for the Western powers. It has held up a mirror to them and made them see that all their talk of human rights, values, and democracy means nothing when push comes to shove. The moral high ground, you see, is a slippery slope. Our next story is from India. The state of West Bengal, to be precise. A lawmaker from West Bengal's ruling party has been arrested on charges of corruption. He's said to have pulled off a massive teacher recruitment scam. In return, he got cash, gold, jewelry and property bonds. And all of this was found hidden at the residence of a confidant of this lawmaker. The images of the haul have gone viral. They show huge piles of cash and gold worth a whopping $6.9 million. Here's a report.
Bundles of cash, scores of gold bricks, and jewelry worth crores. Together, they're worth $6.9 million. These pictures have been trending on Indian social media. People are sharing them on WhatsApp groups in utter disbelief. The piles of cash are almost vulgar and fodder for meme factories. Needless to say, this is ill-gotten wealth found on a man who is technically a lawmaker, a minister no less. His name is Partha Chatterjee, a politician from West Bengal now in prison for corruption. He pulled off a massive teacher recruitment scam. Chatterjee belongs to the All India Trinamool Congress, the party which rules the Indian state of West Bengal. He was the education minister of this state. He illegally recruited teachers in state-run schools, and those with less marks made it to the top of the merit list. Even ineligible candidates were selected. The deserving ones were left out. In return, Chatterjee received cash, gold, bonds, and jewelry. He stashed most of them at the residences of a close aide. This week, India's Enforcement Directorate raided those residences, and here's what it found. Cash, gold, and property deeds worth crores, all wrapped up in duct tape and paper. The cumulative worth of the haul is 55.4 crore Indian rupees, almost $6.9 million. Out of this amount, $6.3 million was seized in cash, and $636,000 was seized in gold. These images tell you the scale of the haul. It had to be transported in trunks. So who exactly was the one hiding this money? A certain Arpita Mukherjee, a 30-year-old actor and model. She has been spotted campaigning for the minister on several occasions. She has now been detained, and the minister is in jail. His party has relieved him of all duties and dissociated itself from the scam. This episode is outrageous, but it's not a one-off. Time and again, several sitting Indian ministers have been accused of scams. From the housing loan scam to the Vyapam exam scam, politicians in India have too often exploited desperate jobless people and exhausted their life savings. The case of Partha Chatterjee is the latest on this vicious list. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
By now you know that Europe likes to present itself as a cheerleader of all things woke, all things progressive, inclusivity, for example. The term means equality, equal opportunity. Inclusivity is antithetical to discrimination, be it on the basis of one's color, religion, gender, or body. For the longest time, the beach was considered off limits for certain body types. A beach is where people like to get some tan, shed some clothes, show off their abs and flawless body. What if your body does not fit into what the society calls flawless? What would that mean? Would that mean you would not go to the beach or flaunt swimwear or take a selfie? Spain says nothing should stop you. It has launched a campaign that says all bodies are beach bodies. Spain is encouraging women to hit the beach this summer, however, wherever, and with whomever. That's what they say. It's an all-out push for inclusivity. Just like what fashion brand Burberry is doing with this ad. It features a Sikh boy. This photo is part of Burberry's back-to-school collection. This is a British luxury brand we're talking about. Never before has this brand interested so many Indians like it did today. Burberry is making headlines around the country. The reason is this ad. It's done its job. It's got people talking. It makes one wonder whether inclusivity is nothing but a marketing gimmick. Ask yourself this. What is it that brands really want? They want to sell. And how do you sell? By telling a compelling story. And what better story than inclusivity in this day and age? It helps people connect with brands, even if their names may be hard to pronounce. French fashion brand Louis Vuitton recently found its first Indian brand ambassador in actor Deepika Padukone. This inclusivity coincided with the rise of the luxury market in India. India has become a lucrative market for luxury brands. India's luxury market is expected to grow at the rate of more than 8% every year between 2021 and 2025. This market is expected to surpass $200 billion by 2030. Also, the number of ultra-rich in India is expected to rise 63% by 2025. People want to relate to a brand that they're buying, and advertisers know this. So they're drafting campaigns accordingly. A recent poll found that consumers today see 40% more ads featuring interracial couples. There's a 37% increase in ads featuring same-sex couples, 23% increase in ads with plus-size models. The result, 71% of the respondents said they're likely to buy from this brand. That's the magic of including inclusivity in your sales pitch. What do you think makes a brand really inclusive? Equal employment opportunity, inclusive growth, making inclusive products, for people across body types and skin color. Can Burberry boast of these? For a country too, inclusivity means equal opportunity. In Spain, there is none. A 2020 report found that 1 in 3 black or ethnic minority respondents experience discrimination. Discrimination in the education sector alone has increased 50% from 2013. Cheering for beach inclusivity during summer is easy, especially when revenue from tourism can really boost the COVID-struck economy. But what about inclusivity beyond sales and marketing? What about ensuring inclusivity for real? Let this be some food for thought. And let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
The US economy contracts for a second straight quarter between April and June, fueling recession fears and a headache for President Joe Biden ahead of key midterm elections. Local officials say Russian strikes target military facilities near Kyiv and residential buildings in the eastern Donetsk region, leaving several dead across war-scarred Ukraine. Bangladesh launches a corruption probe into Nobel Peace Laureate Mohammed Yunus over accusations of embezzlement at a telecoms firm he chairs. Tibetan spiritual leader the Dalai Lama delivers a religious sermon in northern India's Leh after a 4-year absence. It's the 86-year-old's first trip outside Dharamshala, where he lives in exile. According to reports, Chinese billionaire Jack Ma plans to cede control of Ant Group after a regulatory crackdown that thwarted its $37 billion IPO in 2020 and led to a forced restructuring of the financial technology behemoth. French privacy regulators close a case against Facebook after determining the US tech giant had changed the way it collected user data to comply with the law. British broadcasters televise for the first time a UK criminal court sentencing of a man handed life in prison for manslaughter, as the legal system bids to boost transparency. Sea levels are increasing around Britain at a far faster rate than a century ago, while the country is warming slightly more than the global average, according to an annual study. 4-time Formula One world champion Sebastian Vettel has announced that he will retire from the sport at the end of the 2022 season. The 35-year-old German, who won all of his 4 championships with Red Bull between 2010 and 2013, is third on the all-time list of Grand Prix winners with 53 victories. 8-time champions Germany made it to their 9th UEFA Women's European Championship final following a hard-fought 2-1 victory over France. Captain Alexandra Popp scored both the goals on either side of the break. Germany will now face hosts England in the final, which will be played at London's Wembley Stadium on July 31st.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.